So, should you invest in blockchain stocks? Right now, I would say probably not, unless it's a bigger blue chip. And again, these are not investment recommendations, but I have spent a decent amount of time covering these stocks for investment newsletters and sites that I've worked for. Unless they're companies like American Express, Visa, MasterCard, essentially huge names that are not going to go away, they're not going to go bankrupt. And again, do your own research. This is not a recommendation. Do your own research always. But unless you're investing in something like that, I would not invest in the startups doing blockchain, because these companies have been around for years. They have billions and billions and tens of billions of dollars to not only build these blockchain infrastructures out, but they also have the contacts, the research capabilities, the development capabilities, because of the capital they have. So I would not recommend buying smaller blockchain companies in any industry right now, at least not any that I've come across. The better blockchain companies that I've come across so far are, again, these kind of bigger blue chip companies, mainly because they have the capital and the capabilities to continue building this out well and efficiently. But I do think it's going to transform the world. Why don't I specifically recommend you invest in smaller blockchain stocks? We got into this a little bit last week, but typically they're saying in investment and finance that if you've heard the term the first mover advantage, you probably think it's great to be the first mover advantage and to be the first in the industry and kind of break through, and because you get the biggest profits. That is true in some cases. It is not true in most cases, though. There's also a saying in finance that those who go first, the explorers that go first, get the arrows in the back, meaning they have the most problems and they fail in large numbers. And that's, in my experience, mostly true. A real world example of this is MySpace. Came through, exploded, dominated, didn't innovate fast enough, didn't keep compounding its cash flow and developing things. Facebook comes along and then skyrockets and just destroys MySpace. That's an example of this. And especially with these smaller blockchain stocks, they don't, again, have the capital. They don't have the capabilities. So many of them right now are unprofitable. And if you're unprofitable, yes, you can sustain that for a little while by issuing debt and issuing cash, doing stuff like that. But eventually that runs out, and you have to produce profits and cash flow at some point, or you're going to go bankrupt. And most of these companies will go bankrupt at some point, unfortunately. That's another reason, honestly, that I would steer towards the bigger companies, though, too, is because when these companies do go bankrupt, and again, I don't want them to, but that's just what's going to happen based on what happens historically in these kind of new innovations, new technological changes. Bigger companies, they have the capital and the capabilities to develop these things. They also have the capital and the capabilities to buy these assets and buy these sometimes breakthrough technologies on the cheap when they do go bankrupt. Or if they are struggling, then they can buy them out before they go bankrupt. So I do not recommend investing in smaller blockchain companies. Bigger blockchain companies, again, do your own research, but if you do want to invest in blockchain, I would invest in bigger companies. And again, I think it's going to transform the world. But this goes back to, I think, what we talked about in the first Facebook Live we did a couple weeks ago. First recent Facebook Live we did a couple weeks ago, is even though I love this kind of technology, frankly find it fascinating, and I see it coming, I typically don't invest in these kind of things because of the enormous risk. When I mean enormous risk of let's say there are 10 smaller blockchain companies, based on the historical record, kind of what happens over history in new technological changes and innovations, disruptions, if you want to call them that. Only 1 or 2 out of 10 kind of take off and skyrocket, and they become the Facebooks and Ubers of the world, the Googles of the world. Most of the rest of the 7 or 8 or 9 either fail miserably and go bankrupt real quick, or they just kind of do okay and they get bought out. So it's hard to pick the winners at this early stage. And again, 9 out of 10 times being wrong, the odds are not in your favor. of picking the correct small stock. And again, I even know what I'm doing, and I don't invest in this because of how much risk there is, and the odds being 9 to 1 against me that I'm going to pick something right. Um, so I do not recommend investing in blockchain stocks for that reason. Again, even though I think it's going to transform the world.